Hi there. In this episode, we're going to talk about how the Constitution limits the powers of the government through the separation of powers and checks and balances. The U.S. government is organized in a way that it limits its own powers, and there's three ways that it does this: through the Constitution, through the idea of separation of powers, and through something called checks and balances. Now, the Constitution, as a definition, is a body of fundamental principles to which a state is acknowledged to be governed. Basically, it's the rule book. So by agreeing to have a constitution, by agreeing to follow that constitution, we are already on the road to limiting our government. If we had an absolute monarch, or if we were ruled by a dictator, there would be no constitution at all. It would just be whatever that unitary leader had to say. First off, we're going to talk about the separation of powers. This is one of... Hi there. In this episode, we're going to talk about how the Constitution limits the power of the government and how the separation of powers and checks and balances goes about doing so. So first off, you need to realize that the U.S. government is organized in a way that limits its own power. And there's three different ways that power is limited within our government. The Constitution itself is the first way. Inside the Constitution, we apply the ideas of a separation of powers and checks and balances. Together, they work to limit the power of the government. Now, first up is the Constitution itself. The definition of Constitution is a body of fundamental principles that state how a society, how a state is going to be governed. So to begin with, just by agreeing to have a constitution and then following that constitution, we're limiting our own government. If we were governed by a dictatorship, or if we had an absolute monarch, oftentimes you don't have a constitution with those forms of government. There's no need. You have a single ruler who controls everything. So a constitution in itself is a way of limiting the power of the government. Now, in our Constitution, we apply Montesquieu's idea of a separation of powers. Basically, what Montesquieu says is that you don't want power in the hands of one group. That's going to cause corruption. So if we split it into different branches, no one holds all the powers. Each of the branches has its own responsibilities and its own roles to play. So our Constitution does this for us. In Article 1 of the Constitution, we set up the legislative branch, and it's the job of the legislative branch to make the laws. Article 2 of the Constitution sets up the executive branch. This is the president. It's the job of the president and his cabinet to enforce the laws. Article 3 of the Constitution sets up the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, and its job is to interpret the laws. Now, on top of those three branches, we also put into place what are called checks and balances. The checks and balance system allows the separate branches to impact one another. Basically, think of it this way. If we had wild wolves in the wild and they take down a deer, no one wild wolf is going to take the deer all for itself, because they're all pushing and pulling on that piece of meat all at the same time. This is going to keep everybody in check. They're going to be forced to share their meal. And likewise, in our government, the three branches have to share the power. Now, sometimes the checks and balances don't entirely limit the government, and we'll have two branches kind of work together to ensure that the other branch is put into check. Now, if we look at this, each different branch has a check on the other two branches in a different way. So let's start with the executive branch. The president is supposed to carry out and enforce the laws. But the president can also check the legislative branch. The president can propose laws. The president can veto or shoot down laws he doesn't agree or she doesn't agree with. They can call special sessions of Congress. They can make appointments and can negotiate foreign treaties. All these powers of the executive branch keep the legislative branch in check. In addition, we have checks on the judicial branch. The judicial branch, of course, is the court system. The president is the one who gets to appoint federal judges. And the president can also pardon people who have been convicted of federal offense. Next up is the legislative branch. This, of course, is Congress, and they make the laws. Now, Congress can check the president. They can override a president veto. So if they have enough votes in Congress, even if the president doesn't want that law, they can supersede the president and put it into place. They also get to confirm appointments. So the president might pick who he wants to be in a cabinet role, like Secretary of State or an ambassador to England. But it's going to be the legislative branch, it's going to be Congress that confirms those appointments. While the president gets to negotiate treaties, it is the Congress that has to ratify it. Congress, too, is the one who gets to declare war, and Congress appropriates money. They have what is called the power of the purse. So all spending has to be approved by Congress. They can also impeach and remove the president if they have enough votes. Congress also has a check on the judicial branch. Congress creates the lower federal courts, and most cases don't make it all the way up to the Supreme Court. Just a very, very small percentage do. They also can impeach and remove judges. They can propose amendments to overrule judicial decisions, and they are the ones who appoint federal judges. Now, the judicial branch also keeps in check the executive branch, the president, and the legislative branch, Congress. They can declare executive actions, things that the president does, unconstitutional and shoot them down. Likewise, if a law is passed by Congress and signed by the president, that too can be shot down as unconstitutional. By using the checks and balances method, we keep every branch of the government that's been separated in balance, making sure that no one branch gets too powerful. Okay, that's it for this time.